Story 1. Creepy Story. In a remote village nestled deep within the fog-shrouded mountains, a legend whispered through the generations of an ancient curse. They spoke of the cursed bell tower, hidden in the forest's heart, where the tolling of a mysterious bell signaled impending doom. No one who ventured to find the source of the bell ever returned. One stormy night, a scholar named Victor arrived in the village, driven by a thirst for knowledge and a desire to debunk the myth. Dismissing the villagers' warnings, he set out into the forest, determined to uncover the truth. The path twisted and turned, disappearing into the dense undergrowth. Victor's lantern flickered in the rain, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Hours passed, and the forest grew darker and more oppressive. Suddenly, the toll of the bell echoed through the trees, each chime reverberating through Victor's bones. He pressed on, the sound growing louder and more distorted, until he stumbled upon the clearing. There it stood, the bell tower. It was a crumbling structure of ancient stone, covered in vines and decay. As Victor approached, the ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Inside the tower, he found the bell, its surface tarnished and inscribed with runes. As he examined it, a chill crept over him. The air thickened, and a figure emerged from the shadows, a spectral woman in tattered clothing, her eyes hollow and devoid of life. She raised her hand, pointing at Victor, her mouth opening in a silent scream. The bell tolled again, and Victor felt a searing pain in his chest. His vision blurred, and the world around him twisted into a nightmarish landscape. The spectral woman advanced, her movements jerky and unnatural. Victor tried to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. He was rooted to the spot, terror flooding his veins. The bell tolled once more, and Victor's scream joined the cacophony of the cursed chimes. The villagers awoke to the haunting sound echoing through the valley. The next day, they found Victor's lantern at the forest's edge, but there was no sign of him. Only the ominous silence of the forest remained, as if it had swallowed him whole. And so, the legend of the cursed bell tower continued, the tolling bell a grim reminder of those who dared to seek the truth and paid the ultimate price. Story 2. The Man Who Rots. Late at night, Jake found himself exploring the abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town, driven by a dare from his friends. They had mocked his bravery, betting he couldn't spend an hour inside without running out. Determined to prove them wrong, Jake ventured into the decaying building. As he moved through the dimly lit corridors, his flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the peeling walls. Suddenly, he heard a faint whisper, a chilling sound that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. Heart pounding, he turned a corner and froze. There, barely visible in the darkness, stood a figure. The figure seemed almost human, but something was terribly wrong. Its skin was pallid and stretched tight over gaunt bones, its eyes sunken and lifeless. It wore tattered remnants of what might have once been a hospital gown, now stained with dark, unidentifiable patches. Strange, chunky liquid dripped from its body, hissing as it hit the floor and causing the tiles to sizzle and melt away. Jake's breath caught in his throat as the figure slowly lifted its head, revealing a face twisted in eternal agony. He tried to back away, but his legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot. The figure began to move towards him, its movements slow and deliberate, each step accompanied by a sickening, squelching sound. A low, guttural moan escaped its lips, filling the air with a palpable sense of dread. Desperation surged through Jake as he fumbled with his flashlight, its beam faltering before it died completely. He was engulfed in darkness, his senses heightened by the oppressive silence that followed. The moan grew louder, closer, and he could feel the chill of its presence mere inches away. Suddenly, the figure's body seemed to dissolve, the strange liquid allowing it to slip through the walls and reappear right in front of him. Jake watched in horror as the liquid oozed toward him, threatening to decimate any organic matter it touched. Summoning the last of his courage, Jake turned and ran blindly through the asylum's labyrinthine halls, the sound of pursuit echoing behind him. He burst through a door, only to find himself trapped in a small, windowless room. As he turned, the figure was already there, its liquid form solidifying into a grotesque mass. The substance shot out, wrapping around Jake's legs and dragging him to the floor. He screamed in agony as the liquid began to eat through his skin, his flesh sizzling and melting away. The pain was excruciating, his nerves ablaze as the substance worked its way up his body, dissolving muscle and bone alike. Jake's screams echoed through the asylum as the entity tore into him, its touch a burning, corrosive death. His vision blurred, the last thing he saw was the figure looming over him, its empty eyes watching his life drain away. His body convulsed one final time before he succumbed to the unimaginable pain. The asylum fell silent once more, the air thick with the smell of decay and burnt flesh. The dark sentinel resumed its watch, waiting patiently for the next curious soul to wander in, unaware of the horror that awaited them. Story 3. The Distribution Center. The sprawling distribution center stood on the outskirts of town, a monolithic building that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. Its walls were weathered and its windows dark, save for the occasional flicker of movement within. Locals avoided it, claiming it was haunted by more than just the echoes of footsteps and the hum of machinery. Late one evening, David, a new hire at the center, was assigned the graveyard shift. He was eager to prove himself, despite the ominous warnings from his colleagues. "Watch out for the boxes," they would say, smirking, "they tend to move on their own." David dismissed the stories as mere hazing rituals for newcomers. But as midnight approached and the shadows deepened, he began to understand why people feared this place. The cavernous halls were eerily silent, save for the occasional creak and groan of the old building settling. He was tasked with sorting the latest shipment of packages, but something about the boxes felt off. They were cold to the touch, unnaturally so, and seemed to vibrate faintly. Ignoring the prickling sensation on the back of his neck, David continued his work, placing each box on the conveyor belt that snaked through the warehouse. As he worked, he noticed one particular box that seemed out of place. It was an antique wooden crate, unlike the modern cardboard packages. It was marked with strange symbols that he couldn't decipher. Curiosity got the better of him, and he pried it open. Inside, he found an assortment of dusty, old-fashioned dolls. Their glass eyes seemed to follow his every move, and their faces were twisted into grotesque expressions. He shuddered and quickly closed the lid, but the air around him had changed. It felt thicker, colder. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the warehouse into darkness. David's breath quickened, and he fumbled for his flashlight. The beam of light cut through the blackness, revealing rows of boxes stacked high. But something was wrong, the boxes were no longer where he had placed them. They had moved. A chill ran down his spine as he realized he wasn't alone. The sound of shuffling footsteps echoed through the halls, accompanied by faint whispers. He spun around, trying to locate the source, but the flashlight beam only revealed empty aisles. Heart pounding, David stumbled towards the exit, but the path seemed to twist and turn, leading him deeper into the labyrinth of boxes. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, forming words he couldn't understand. In the dim light, he saw shadows darting between the stacks, too quick to be human. Finally, he reached a dead end. The wooden crate was there, waiting for him. The lid was ajar, and the dolls had spilled out, their eyes glinting in the flashlight's beam. One of the dolls, larger than the rest, seemed to be standing on its own. It took a step towards him, its joints creaking. David's scream echoed through the empty halls, unheard by anyone outside. The next morning, the day shift workers found the warehouse in disarray, with boxes strewn everywhere and no sign of David. The wooden crate was sealed shut once more, its contents hidden from sight. No one dared to open it again. From that night on, the workers at the distribution center noticed a new addition to the eerie tales: the legend of David, the one who disappeared, and the haunted crate that seemed to move on its own.